John Barry Parker of Instone Court, Munderfield, born and bred, born in the room above. And that's who I am.
Can you tell us your very first memory of working on the hop farm?
Yes. Hop pickers. Hundreds of hop pickers in the buildings everywhere. And I was always a bit frightened of them, but they were very nice people, really. They were certainly short of money, and it was a good holiday for them because they had no other chance of going out into the country. And some of them took it seriously and earned money. Others of them treated it as a holiday. Just went on and on and on. But the majority of them came to earn some money. Very disappointed. We used to have a strike every year. It was the thing to do to have a strike. And we used to brew our own cider, of course. And Father got the buckets out and I used to give them plenty of cider, and the next morning they were back at work. It always happened like that. But you had to have a strike. It was the thing to do. It was a day off, really.
When they were striking, were they shouting and demanding?
No. It was more quiet than anything. We ain't going to work. Have some cider? Oh, thank you. Yes. Father was past master at that. He always said there was far more done by licking than biting, as any old spaniel will tell you. And he was very true about that. It's very true even to this day, isn't it? You can get far more by kindness than threats.
You were telling us how did your pickers from Birmingham and the Blackburn, could you describe how they got here?
Well, he always appointed a gang of women in the area, somebody you'd known probably for years, and she would assemble a gang of people to bring with her, and she would arrange. It was old Mrs. Jackson originally. She would arrange transport, and we would pay the driver for his use of his bus and lorry. And that's how they got here. But they used to come and go very often. I don't know how they travelled, but between the husbands would come down the weekends.
But you were telling us they arrived in a truck and then went home in 3 trucks.
Well, that's because there were some apple orchards, and they'd spend all their evenings gathering apples and take back to Birmingham and sell them on the streets. I don't blame them. In those early days, we couldn't sell them anyway. It wasn't until the war came along you could sell apples that we took any interest in them.
So your kiln, how did you power your kiln?
Well, originally it was 2 small kilns with open anthracite fires and no fan. And then Father put in a fan which drove both of the kilns, but it was still open fire. You have to be very careful. You get too much wind under an anthracite fire and it goes to clinker. It was quite a skilled job. You could hardly leave your fire more than an hour. And I didn't do any drying in those days, of course, but I was about there and saw what went on. But it was the 2 old Gottin and Corbett that did all the drying. Then, of course, we went from there. We knocked both kilns into one, make one big one. Then we built another kiln and went to oil, and that's how it went. And we got 5 now. 4 killed now.
Well, tell me about where the coal came from, the anthracite.
It came from one of the deep pits in Wales, where the hard coal is, and I think it was called Gonky Gerwin, or some such name. Sounds like that, but not being a very good Welsh speaker, I wouldn't honestly know. But I think it was Gonky Gerwin, and it arrived at Bromyard in railway trucks. We went down with horse and wagon, and hauled it from there, and then put it in for the winter, and used it during the winter. And if there was any over, of course, it would be ideal for the aga. But you had to crack it up a bit. That's one thing I used to love doing. When they raked out the fires in the morning, they'd put it in a pile outside, take a potato and stick it in there. By dinner time, it was beautiful. The skin and all was perfect. I don't suppose you'd try it that these days. Used to be hungry in those days, though.
What was your least favourite job?
Powdering and sulphuring. Oh, both dusts. Sulphur was the worst because you did that in the daylight when you were sweating and it stuck to your eyes. Stuck to the sweat. Ran into your eyes and you couldn't see a darn thing. Powdering was always done at night. And it was nicotine. Started off about 2%, finished up at 4%, I think. Just to kill the aphis. If you got the aphis young enough, it'd do the job well, but once they got adults, they gobbled it up. It was like a honeypot to them, I think, the old ones. That's what, and it bred immunity to it in the finish, and it didn't kill them. So when we went over to other stuffs.
Do you remember when you got your first machine?
Oh yes, I do. It was great fun. It was only a little tiny thing, but it picked us 60 sacks a day. That's all we wanted in those days.
So can you tell us the make and the year?
It was Brough. Straight after the war, I suppose. Everybody went for it. They were absolutely unheard of 2 years before, and the next year everybody had got one. But they were the invention of the devil, we thought at the time, but wouldn't it be awful without them? You couldn't do it, actually.
So can you describe how that changed things for you?
Well, you didn't need anybody from Hensford and Dudley. They still wanted to come, some of them, and they used to come and work on the machine for a year or two, till they realised that the glamour had gone out of it. It was back to hourly working rather than pleasing yourself what you did. And they gradually died away or stopped coming, or their own conditions improved probably.
Did you have travellers coming here to work?
Travellers? Occasionally, yes. We had one family. We've still got one working here today from the origins that came years and years ago. But there again, they were. One was a traveller, and the husband was an ex-miner. But no, there used to be 2,000 Welsh and 2,000 travellers coming to Frome. That's when old Fred Harris was in charge. You've heard of him, I expect. He was a lovely policeman. He said he ruled with a bunch of five, and he did too. He always had a couple of mates come along and help during Hopper, you know. But it was a lovely story. His son, Edgar, became a police inspector in Birmingham. And one day, one of his colleagues from the other side of the cities came and said, Harris, I've got some trouble with some gypsies. I can't get them to move. You know how to deal with gypsies. Well, he said, I didn't know anything more about gypsies than Adam and Eve. Because I knew Edgar quite well at that time. And off he goes over with this chap to see these. They all knew who it was. And they said, oh, well, no, Mr. Harris, we're moving. We're gone tonight. And they did. He said, I've never been so glad to be my father's son. That was a good many years ago, of course.
Was he kept busy, PC Harris?
Oh, yes. But they knew him. They respected him. He did once hit one bloke in the face down in the chase, I think, and knocked the bloke out behind him. Don't think you better put that in your story.
What was it like, Bishopsfroom, in those days?
Oh, well, when they stopped picking, it was murder in there. You couldn't move down the street for folks. There were 2 pubs there and they were roaring trade. Still, somebody got to drink the beer, hadn't they? They'd picked it all.
We were told that farms issued tokens to be used in...
Oh, that was when you were measured at the crib. Instead of paying you there and then on the spot for how many, because it was big bushel baskets, and it was generally about 2 or 3 to the shilling you got to fill. And if you got them down to 2, you were doing well. If you get 2 off the governor. But some people gave out tokens, which it could be cashed at the farm shop. But not everybody did that. We, in fact, booked. My sister used to do the booking. They had a little card, and you had a card. And if you picked 10 bushel at this measuring, it went down as 10 in the book, and you had it. Well, she would put 10 in her book as well. So you could add it up at the end. No question of altering or anything like that. And 10 bushels were good half day's pick that would for one person. So if you picked 20 in a day, you were doing well.
Tell us that again, as soon as you left school?
As soon as I left school, I was put to do the measuring. I don't say I ever enjoyed it, but it was a lot of fun as well, I suppose.
We heard that bushers had to be quite tough.
Well, agile more than tough, I think. They'd have you in the crib if they could. But I was bushel with 1 foot over the bottom rail. They couldn't get me in then. No, ours were a very peaceful lot, really. There weren't too many men amongst them, you see. They were mostly women. So they didn't attack me too often. Poor little boy. And I suppose I was about 16, 17.
Do you remember any pickers giving you trouble?
No, not really. There was always some old man. I remember when there was a Hackett, he always moaned, but you never took any notice of it, so it was just him. I mean, he was like that, and you took it with his stride, and everybody is different, aren't they? And some of them were absolutely delightful. But I always remember him. He was a little eccentric, I suppose.
Did you ever get chucked in the crib?
No, never. Not once.
Did you ever see it happening?
Did you ever see it happening to anyone else?
Well, I never saw many other people bushering, so I was doing it myself, so no, I didn't. There were a lot about that, but I never saw any of it. Different parts of the world, yes. Especially the last day. They would try then. They never succeeded.
What was the last day like?
A bit like the end of Christmas, or, a party breaking up, almost. And they were all looking forward to the bit of money they'd got collected to take home. It was generally to buy shoes for the children. I can remember years after, we had one little boy. His mother was Spanish, and she was married a miner of the Midlands. And this boy, he was an imp. He really was. He was into everything. Outside of his trousers and everything lot, just as he should be. And some years later, a knock on the door, and I went to answer it. He said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" I said, "Yes, you're Freddie Burks." And there he was, in a brand new Merc. Oh dear.
You did all right then?
Yeah.
He done all right. He was a mischievous beggar. But there you are. That's how you get on, isn't it?
When they arrived, did they look like they were poor and needed money?
Oh yes.
Can you just describe that?
I can't really. It's a long time ago, My memory is not that good. At least, most things it isn't. Things I want to remember, I never can. I never could remember names.
Someone told me that some of the Welsh pickers used to bring whippets.
Oh yeah. A lot of them had dogs. All the gypsies had it too. Long dogs. I can remember one year, this field in front of the house, waking up one Sunday morning, and there was about 70 horses in it. They were just getting them out. They'd take them along at night and turn them into a field where there was plenty of grass and fetch them just before the boss woke up in the morning. We were full of horses.
Were they selling or trading horses?
Oh, they used to have a go up at the Holly Bush here on a couple of Sundays after hop picking. You'd get them up, trotting them up and down the road and something or another. Oh, Ted Price, the landlord, he knew how to handle them. He did very well out of them, I should have thought. William the Conqueror. He lives here. Ever since I was a boy, these old beams, they crack every now and again. That's always William.
So, when did you take over from your father?
I don't know that I ever did. We still trade as Sidney J. Parker and Son. You don't take over to the dots, it just grows around you. I notice Simon's doing it to me. If he wants something, I used to do it to Father. You suggest it to him. You know damn well he'd say no. Simon knows I shall say no. And then about a year later, at the most, he'll come back and say, well, I think if you read so-and-so, exactly what we hoped they'd say. And that's how you progress in farming. You think it out a long time, then commit yourself wholeheartedly.
Many hop farms have gone by the wayside. Why do you think you're still growing hops here?
I think you have to have a passion for it. I love the things. They're intriguing. Sometimes they're worth a lot of money. Not always. Sometimes they're a damned expense. But, and a very big disappointment. But they are always interesting. I know the idea of going into business is to make money. I'm not sure that is the right answer. I think it's to live a satisfying life. That was all gypsies, though, and a few locals. But there weren't many that did that.
So when you were a young man, how many acres were you growing? How many hops?
About 10. We had some pole work all through the wall. Just 2 poles instead of string like they do today. It was ash poles, sharpened and stuck in the ground. And the hops grew up the poles. And the old beggars, the hop pickers, that's where you had the pole man. He was the chap that looked after the hops in the yard with the pickers around. And he was supposed to get the poles for them. But if they were waiting, they'd wriggle and they'd make sure they broke him off. And they could have a good fire. Oh, it was a great skill, that pole pitching. They'd put them in one side and the other one the other side. And they'd be as true as anything. However crooked the poles were, they'd have them twist them so that they were all... They were very clever at that.
Who did that sort of job?
Well, Corbett did it here for years. He was the stockman, really. But he was bloody good at that.
So you had your 10 acres. How many pockets would that produce?
About 70 something, I think. Worrying me now. I think the first time Father was here, he had 18 pockets the first year. So, when he first came,
How many? What sort of varieties did you grow?
I presume they were Fuggles or Enham Joneses. Enham Jones was a huge big hop, very coarse. We never grew Goldings. Fuggles. And I started using Northern Brewer and things like that. But, far too many varieties now.
What's been the greatest threat to growing hops in your time?
Disease. Downy mildew, without any shadow of doubt. I mean, wilt has done a lot, but then they've got the wilt varieties that are resistant. So, not resistant, but tolerant. So, breeding progress. But definitely, downy mildew is the worst thing. It still is.
Have you ever been affected by that?
We were affected last year by it.
Finally, Barry, could I ask you, it's just for our evaluation, if you could tell us why you think making a film about the heritage of hops in the county is worthwhile?
Well, I've often thought that hops have evolved more than most things over the years, from the pole work to the wire work and all that sort of thing, which is very scientific and quick nowadays. So that there has been a vast movement in hops, let alone anything else. I mean, you get more milk out of a cow now because you breed differently, but that's not the same thing quite. Hops, you have to wait for them to grow, and you can't do it in 5 minutes. It takes years. And we've got a hop now that Simon's nurtured, which we think is a resistant fuggle to wilt. But nobody will help us out. Mr. Darby, Dr. Darby, says it is a fuggle, but other people say it isn't. But until we can resolve that, we don't know what to do with it. It costs 7,000 quid to have it. I think it's something like that. To have it DNA'd or whatever you do with it.
So you do think it's important that we record the stories around the hops?
Well, you there's such a change that from the time I was a boy to now, it's unrecognisable, to be honest. And if that is not recorded, and all fogies like me are out of the way, nobody will know what happened. Because it is an interesting story, there's no question about that. Peter Davis was an inspiration to hop growing, really. He could do things with hops that nobody else could. Not always the right thing, but he tried it. But it doesn't want losing, no.